Hi, everyone. This is Talks at Google, and I'm your host, Soumya. Yoga is everywhere. You see a studio in every corner, and more recently, you see an app for every type of yoga. But what is yoga? Is it a mental practice? Is it a meditation practice? To answer, there's a massive debate about this. And to answer this and many questions, I have with us our guest today, Dylan Werner. Dylan is massive, has a massive following on Instagram. He's known for his strong movements, his strong inversion practice, and his journey into yoga has been very unique. But I'm going to invite Dylan to share that himself. So please join me in welcoming Dylan Werner, one of the leading yogis in the world. You're joining us from Bali today, and it's your yoga journey that's taken you there. So I didn't spend any time on intro because I do want to hear from you, and I want you to share that with our guests today. So can you tell us how you got into yoga? How did this all start?
I think it's funny because this is probably the number one question that I get on every single podcast or interview or anything that I've done. And at this point, I've done quite a few. And it's like for the people that do really follow me and ask or kind of know my story already, I usually like to give them something new, or it's either that or I try to blow over it real quick because I'm kind of tired of telling the story. But for those that are just joining, I originally found yoga in 2000, 2001, somewhere around that time. I was doing martial arts. This kind of mixed martial arts. It's called Hapdo Sul. It's Korean martial arts that combine a bunch of different things. And one of the aspects that they put into it, or at least one day a week, was yoga. And it wasn't really so much yoga like how I would probably say yoga. We did do some warrior poses and those kinds of things. But yeah, there was a little level of meditation that went into it and a bit of flexibility, but it didn't really, I don't know, it wasn't kind of like the yoga that I would define as yoga now, or at least the hatha, the movement part of it. So it was actually quite a few years later when I was about 29 years old, I think 2009 or so, when I really started to come into yoga, invited to a class or doing handstands. It was hard. And even then, after about a year that I don't think I was really practicing yoga, I was practicing hatha, or vinyasa. I was practicing all the physical movements, which is yoga. I mean, it's not to say that it's not yoga. Everybody defines yoga as something a little bit different. I think anybody that's been on this path of yoga through their time and their experience, the meaning of what yoga is it changes. It becomes more intimate. It broadens. It starts to include more things, and then other things become more specific.
I was surprised. I'm interrupting you here, Dylan, because when you said hatha and vinyasa and you said not real yoga, that surprises me because I'm thinking that's yoga, vinyasa, hatha.
And for you, that's yoga. Everybody defines things differently. And it's not for one person to tell someone else what their definition is or what they think of something. It's actually something I've been playing or kind of thinking about a lot, is this idea of subjective and non-subjective words. So a subjective word is something that, subjective and objective, let's call it that way. So an objective word is something that we all agree on. There's very little dispute over, something like lamp or table or phone or something like that. It's a physical object, usually a noun, and we could see it. It's tangible. We know what it is. And we all would generally, if you put us in separate rooms and said, what is this? We'd all pretty much give you the exact same answer. And then you have subjective words, which are all the other words. Those are the words that are attached to our experience, our definition. They're all our feelings and emotions. Love is definitely very subjective. Fear is subjective. even ideas of what like democracy means or country, or these are all also subjective words, and yoga is very much a subjective word. We come to it with our own definition. In fact, right now, look at the book that I'm reading. I just started into it. Look at my Kindle here. Oh, Roots of Yoga, James Mallinson. So I've read about an hour and a half of it, and it's kind of just started into like, what is yoga? And in that hour and a half of it talking about what is yoga and really what is yoga from a traditional sense, it has not mentioned asana once. And like I'm still getting into it. I mean, it's a 15-hour book that basically tells you the roots of yoga. But yeah, so it's really interesting how we define what is yoga. And when I started doing yoga in my martial arts class, I called it yoga, and that's what I thought was yoga because that was my only experience with yoga. And then when I went to a more traditional, it was more like not traditional, but it was a yoga class. It was in a yoga studio. It was power yoga, power vinyasa, heated. And then I defined that as yoga. And then after about 8 months or so, I really wanted to kind of deepen my journey with it. And I went and took a teacher training. And then after the teacher training, I'm learning all these different ideas and philosophies and all the limbs and the sutras and all that. And then and meditation and pranayama. And it was like, oh, okay, so this is yoga. And then here I am about 11 years now or so of from when I went into that studio class. I guess I'm about 20 years now since when I first was introduced to what hatha yoga was, or like the physical practice. But here I am still defining what yoga is. And I think the advice that I give to anybody that's trying to define this is to look more to see what it is rather than what it isn't. We have the way that we define most things is we see it as like, okay, well, it's not this, it's not this, and it's not this. And by all the things that it's not, we understand what it is. And with yoga, it's a little bit harder to do that, but you still get, yeah. I mean, I'm also guilty of that, saying, oh, that's not yoga, and that's not yoga, but it doesn't really help you on that journey. So yeah, the hatha yoga part is definitely yoga. And it is life-changing, and especially for people that aren't so connected to their body. We kind of have this tendency as people, and it's ingrained in our culture, to separate the mind, the spirit, and the body from each other. And yoga is one of these practices that works to bring those back together. And through that process, we start to see the truth of connection and how everything is whole and united and interdependent. So yeah, all right. So then I start yoga. I get into it.
And then, Dylan, when you were talking about yoga, you said you defined yoga differently depending on what you saw or what you were taught. How do you define yoga today? If somebody was to say, I know you practice yoga, what does that mean to you? How do you answer that?
For me, yoga is really, it's not so much that I practice yoga. Yoga, even actually as I'm listening to this book, it doesn't talk about yoga as being a practice, but as a state of being, as a state of connection or a state of joining together. And actually, it's really interesting. We start getting into more of the historical, like really deep into like hundreds and thousands of years ago of where yoga was coming from. Even words like yuj, like we this word yoga comes from like to join together, connected. Even that was back then was controversial, and some people said it was this thing, and some people said it wasn't. And I think like anybody that's listening and trying to understand yoga, it's all that's okay. Like for people to have different definitions of it. But to answer your question, it's really about understanding, or the journey to yoga is understanding how I'm connected to the whole, or part of the whole, or the whole in general. It's the practice of breaking down illusion, or the illusion of separation, to think that we are different because I see you and you see me, and there's no way I could see myself. And so I think that somehow separate from everything else. Maybe a different question or different answer than you're expecting. I don't know.
Oh, this is interesting. I was surprised to hear when you said Hatha Yoga Vinyasa is not yoga, but now I hear what you're saying, because you're saying it's more than that.
I'm not saying it's not yoga. I'm saying that that was what I'm saying is, like, if you take a puzzle, right, and you get like this 1,000-piece puzzle, and you just grab 2 pieces of it, and you go, this is the picture, right? This is what I'm looking at. It is the puzzle, right? It is a part of the puzzle. It is a piece of the puzzle, but it gives you a very small picture, very small idea of what you're actually looking at, or what the totality of it is. And so when I came into it, I was seeing one piece of the puzzle, thinking that it was the entire picture. And now, like, through my practice, I would say that now I recognize, even as much study and practice as I've done in it, now I recognize that I'm still only holding a piece, looking for the rest.
Was there somebody or a specific guru or yogi or mentor that you look back at and think that this is the person who influenced how I think about yoga?
Every person that I've come across that has taught some truth or knowledge, or some conversation has led to the deeper understanding. I mean, ultimately, yoga is this path to understanding truth. Some of them were teachers. I definitely have, like, my group of teachers that I look up to and admire, especially the teachers in the beginning that opened up so many doors. And that's kind of an interesting thing, like, with your path, as you move along, some of the most influential teachers I had in the past, and I think this goes for most people, weren't the ones that were the most famous or the most knowledgeable, but because at that time I knew so little, all these doors were closed, and they were the ones opening the doors. They had the biggest impact on my life, even though if I go back now, I'd probably disagree with a lot of what they said. Well, maybe not a lot, but yeah, now that I have, like, a different opinion, or more formed in my viewpoint, in my experience, yeah, they were the ones that opened the doors. And now for me as a teacher, where the majority of the time I spend teaching or in self-study and svadhyaya, my teachers really become my students, and seeing what I need to share with them, or what I need to give to them, or the questions that they ask, or just seeing the journey in their lives. And in the process of teaching, I learned so much, in the process of preparing. And so really, like, my teachers are all now my students, and which tend to be the most influential. I think that's maybe good and bad, partly because, like, as a teacher, I'm kind of going on my own path, or my own way of trying to understand how to share things, or how to connect with people, and share these ideas, these philosophies that have been so transformative in my life. And there's already, like, other teachers out there doing the same thing, and I don't need to repay someone else's path. So yeah, I tend to be on my own a lot more than I was in the beginning, as far as, like, finding gurus or teachers or those kinds of things.
Okay. And then Dylan, I follow you on Instagram, and I'm sure many others who are listening to us today have seen your posts on Instagram. You have super strong balances, movements. When I look at those pictures, I'm thinking from one piece of yoga. So if I think about the physical aspect, this is it. Is there something though that you're working on towards a goal of a different kind of a handstand, or do these come easy? Have they always come easy to you?
Some stuff has been easy for me, for sure. I have my strengths, which tend to be balance and strength. Strength is my strength, which is a funny thing to say. Flexibility hasn't come easy to me, though I'm a pretty flexible person now. It's taken a lot of work and a lot of practice. I do my practice because I like to move, and I'm always working on different things and trying to understand how to create balance in the body, how to create freedom of movement. Specifically, like I'm still working on the most basic poses. Like I still work on pigeon pose.
I
So
actually, yeah, right. I can do this very easily. And I know, I don't know if you've learned it, but I know you mentioned in one of your videos that you struggle with it. It was an inspiration for me because I'm following everything else that you're doing. And so that helped me realize, okay, yeah, we're all working on our things. The
yeah, I can't bind like this. My
yeah,
shoulders are
like,
there's that's not happening. And I worked at it for a long time, and I improved at it, the Gomukhasana bind.
yeah,
But I started to realize that it wasn't really healthy for my body, for my shoulders. With everything else that I did, my shoulders didn't want to go in that position. And I started to think this is an interesting thing with movement in general, is we think we should be able to do all these things and we want to be able to do all these things, but what value, what benefit does it actually give to us? Do we get any benefit from being able to bind our hands behind our back? I mean, yeah, maybe you could wash your back a little bit better or get that scratch. Like I would like to do those kinds of things, but instead I just buy a brush so I could wash my own back. But other than that, like the journey of really trying to get that flexible internal rotation of the shoulders was just leading me to shoulder injuries because my shoulders don't want to go that way.
yeah.
And so I really backed off from trying to do that, as that being a goal. Like, really, what am I going to get out of this? And if I keep pushing this, I'm probably just going to have injury. And I've learned that about a lot of different poses that my body just doesn't want to do. It's not designed that way. And I would say that's a huge part of the yoga practice, is accepting those things that we can't do. So I think more the bigger lesson that I learned about like not being able to do Gomukhasana is the lesson of accepting that I can't do Gomukhasana. And I think that has a lot more impact in my life overall, and just like how it's changed me as a person, than being able to bind my hands behind my back for the sake of binding my hands behind my back. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Dylan, I wanted to now switch topics here and talk about your latest book. The book Illuminated Breath, that I know is available now to buy on Amazon.
This one?
It's the same one, yeah. Have you read it? I'm still reading it. I've just got it. But when you think
I'm going
about
to start on it soon.
Book, I'm I'm thinking about this is a book on breathing. Why do I need a book on something that's so basic? I breathe, obviously. Why do I need to read about it?
That's a, like, I love that question. I love there's a lot. It's funny. I wrote this book, and I've read a lot of books on breathing, and I've really been into breathing for a long time. So for me, like, I've always, I guess since I started into yoga and started pranayama, actually, I take that back. I've always understood the importance of breathing from being an athlete. I was a wrestler, and wrestling is really dependent on your cardiovascular health. And so many times when you're going, you can't breathe. So I've always kind of understood the importance of breathing. And as a kid, I had a fascination with holding my breath. So I read a lot of different books on breathing. There was one that came out while I was in the middle of writing it, Breath by James Nestor. And the funny thing is I just started reading that book, and I didn't want to read it while I was writing my book because I didn't want to be influenced at all, or by either like to put stuff in that I wanted to put in, or leave stuff out that I wanted to put in based on what he put into his book. And now reading it, the books are like 100% different. And I'm actually really loving his book. It's funny, we're on here to promote my book, but I'm going to promote his book. His book is fantastic, but in a completely different way. And I think one of the ways that one of the things that he does in that book is really tell you the importance of breathing in general. My book is more about how to use the breath, right? How to use the breath as a tool to make your life better, and more like in pranayama, how each one of these different breaths affect us on a physiological level, on an emotional level, even on a spiritual level, and how when we know the action and the effect of these breaths, we could move towards our goal in that sense. But it's
Dylan, can you
there
explain
there's
that a
there
little bit more?
I'll explain it more. I
Okay.
still want to answer your question here. I know the way I like to answer things, I like to go kind of really far around and then get to the point, and where
Okay.
you're sitting there like, when is he going to get? I get to the point, but it's right. What's the saying? It's not about the destination. It's about the journey.
Yeah.
And sometimes the journey to the answer, like we all want the answer right away. Okay, what is it? Just give me like 3 or 4 bullet points of exactly what it is that we're talking about. But we don't really learn a lot just by arriving at the conclusion immediately. We learn by our journey to the conclusion. Breathing. So I was in another podcast, and I think I said this, like, if you how you do one thing is how you do everything, and we don't do anything more than breathe. Breathing is the thing that we do more than everything.
Yeah.
When we're taught about the pinnacles of health, these if you were to ask that same question, you're like, why should I eat good? Why should I care about diet or what I put into my body? Right? Why does that matter? I'd eat all the food I want all the time. It's fine. Right? It's basically that's the
Yeah.
exact same question that you asked me. Why does it matter what I put into my body? Same thing with fitness too. Like fitness is another one of these things that it matters how we do it, and to our goals. For the basic health thing, our primary fuel is the breath, and how our body absorbs the oxygen matters on how we put it into the body. If I'm breathing in through my nose, or if I'm breathing in through my mouth, how fast I do it, how much CO2 I'm retaining, how much CO2 I'm blowing off. So all these different things really do affect it. I guess on there's deeper parts of that beyond just the health. The big thing is the breath is directly linked to the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. So our fight or flight, or our rest and digest. And if you take an inhale, the inhale is going to stimulate your sympathetic nervous system. You take an exhale, the exhale moves to the parasympathetic nervous system. And just in the act of breathing normally through your nose, you create balance in you create balance in your autonomic nervous system. If I were to start breathing fast and heavy through my mouth, then I'm going to stimulate my sympathetic nervous system. Even on the inhale and exhale, as I breathe faster, it goes more sympathetic, slower, more parasympathetic. On top of that, I'm going to start breathing off more carbon dioxide, which makes it harder for the body to absorb oxygen. We think that if I breathe more, that I get more oxygen into my body, and it's actually the opposite effect. Like, oxygen does come into the body, and then it has to attach the red blood cells, but then it has to come off the red blood cells and get into the tissue. Well, the mechanism that allows the oxygen to come off of the red blood cells and go into the tissue so that it can be used and converted into energy and fuel is carbon dioxide and our pH. So carbon dioxide makes the body more acidic, and that process allows oxygen to move into the cells. And through that, yeah, I mean, like, we could go so deep into the science, but essentially everything that you do and how you feel, your emotions, is a direct result of how you're breathing. And you see that, like, we usually think about it, it's in the reverse. We get emotional, and then we see the change in respiration from the emotions that we have. if you look at somebody that's calm and relaxed, they're not sitting here like this, right? Like that doesn't feel calm and relaxed to anybody.
Yeah.
Right. Or if I'm super upset and angry or panicky, I'm not like this. Right. It's the breath is directly linked to our emotions in that way. And we think it's like the emotions to the breath, but it's actually the breath to the emotions, because it's the breath that is controlling our physiology. And then our physiology is how we respond to how we feel about our environment. So that's like really on the most basic level. You could use the breath really as a tool for anything. And that's really what my book is about, or the big part of my book is, how do we use this amazing tool that we have readily available to us all the time, anywhere, without anything else. That's also one of the most amazing things, is anywhere you are, anytime, you can do these practices. And if you want, well, the practice that I did this morning, and what I do pretty much every morning, was today 45 minutes, because we had this talk, and it's 8:30 here right now. So I just did 45 minutes of breath practice, which is to increase my athletic performance, increase how much air my lungs could hold, the strength of my respiratory muscles, and also to decrease the effort of my respiratory muscles, to increase my respiratory dexterity. So being able to use my breath as like a fine motor skill, to increase my VO2 max, how much oxygen my body's actually able to utilize, to increase my red blood cell count so I could bring more oxygen to my tissues. So all these different things, and then also to help with the balance and the health of my nervous system. But you could use it also to help you sleep, to increase energy, to relax, help improve your libido and your sex drive, pretty much boost metabolism and weight loss. We lose weight out of our mouth. This is like, we think like this is something that most people don't understand. If I was actually just watching this documentary on breatharians. Breatharians are, it was not a positive documentary for breatharians. So for those of you who don't know, a breatharian is somebody that claims that they live off of the prana in the air, the energy that is just readily available in the earth, and they don't eat or drink water at all, only if they want to, for social things, whatever. And supposedly there's all these studies and stuff, but the documentary that was doing it took this woman who is, this was quite a while ago, probably like 15 years ago. They took this woman who wrote this book on being a breatharian and was very much like about promoting it. And they, with the camera crew and people, they monitored her. And I think like it was like after 4 days or something like that, she had lost 6 kilos. All right, which is about, in the US, it's it's about like 14 pounds. Yeah, it's about 14 pounds. Which is a lot to lose in just a few days. And then they started breaking down all the science to it, which is very interesting, because, and this is actually, I write this down in my book too. When we inhale oxygen and nitrogen and these other inert molecules. And when we breathe out, then it comes in, and then it goes through cellular respiration. And we exhale carbon dioxide and water, CO2 and water. Well, we are mostly made out of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. Those are the primary building blocks of us. And then we have some sulfates and nitrogens. And that's really all the food that we take in. And some other stuff too, but that's kind of the majority of it. As I exhale, I'm exhaling carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide has weight. After, I think we exhale about a gram of carbon every minute. So which is, a gram is about 2 or 3 aspirin, or tablets, whatever. So It's quite a lot over time. Over an hour, we are breathing off, or the period of a day, we're breathing off a lot of carbon. If we work out and we want to lose weight, well, that weight comes out from breathing, the majority of it. The other part is water that we either urinate or defecate, which is
So,
also a lot of water.
so Dylan, you obviously know the subject really well. You've written a book on it. But for those who don't have a deep understanding, but are interested and would like to start a breathing practice, where do they begin? What's the one or two things that they can do to explore it?
I think the first part is just knowing how to breathe right, because that's what you're doing all throughout the day. Knowing how to be efficient and effective in your breathing. The first part, the number one thing, is to breathe through your nose. It makes a huge difference. The first thing that the nose does is it down regulates the breath. So that means we're breathing less. When you start to really understand the science of breathing, all the science points to we need to breathe less. Even the ancient yogis, if you go back, the yogis thought we had so many breaths in this life, and that when you ran out of breaths, you died. And so one of the ways that we would live longer was by breathing less. And even though that's the thought process of it, we obviously don't have a finite number of breaths, or we do have a finite number of breaths, but it's not like a certain number that we all have.
Yeah.
And if we breathe less, we're going to use up less breaths. But the fact of how the breath affects us, or breathing less affects our physiology, really does improve our health, and you do live longer by breathing less. So that I think that's like the first part. Like the first part of the breath practice is just learning how to breathe in your normal everyday life. Breathe through the nose, learn how to have good posture, sit up right, change the types of chairs that you're sitting in. Like right now, I'm sitting in a completely flat chair. I try not to sit in chairs that put me back, like this position here, where we're rounding our lower back, which most chairs do. They put the knees up higher, pushes back, like you're the chair inside your car. The seat, the seat inside your car, lifts your knees up higher, puts you back, puts you in this position that takes no effort. And I teach teacher trainings, and which are like 200 or 300 hours, and a good majority of those teacher trainings were sitting on the floor. And I also have two other teachers that are in their 70s that teach with me, and they sit on the floor the whole time. And it's funny to see people that are 19, 20, 21 to 30, what, a year old adults that just can't sit on the floor because they never learned how to sit. And so they're always like with this rounded back, shoulders forward. And what this does is it affects our container, which holds our lungs. So how we're able to breathe, it changes the tension of the diaphragm, our 3 different diaphragms. So like learning posture is a big important part of breathing. The other thing is how we breathe. So most people, if you say take a deep breath, they inhale. And as in the inhale, you see like this tension here in their latissimus muscles and their scalenes, like kind of, and the collarbones rise and the shoulders lift up, and we start to breathe upwards like this way. And that's really inefficient. We want to think of breathing from really the center of our rib cage, as we're trying to take like a rubber band and expand outwards in all directions. So as I inhale, my shoulders stay the same place and I move outwards. When you can think about it, breathe less. But then when you move into breathing practices, it's good to have a teacher. I mean, I would say that, like, if you really want to know like breathing practices, like here's everything really that you need to know about it, including the physiology. And then I have 10 different practices in here in the book. So if you go into it, like, here's one, athletic performance here, right? Go through, and then brings you through, and then you have like a chart right here. It's weird to, that has basically the exercise into it and how to do it. Also have a breath plan on Alo Moves, which is an online platform that I
Yep.
teach on. And I'm going to be making some videos, some breath practice videos for YouTube as well. So for those people that can't afford Alo Moves, I could put something out there that's free. Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
also a million other teachers out there teaching breathing. I think where one of the things that made me want to write this book is after so many years of learning breath practices from everybody, the amount of breathing practices that I learned from people that didn't really have a clear intention behind why we're doing the practice, or didn't really
Yeah.
understand the breath as the tool of why it's working. If I go into the gym and I want to work out my chest, I don't get on a leg machine, right? Because I know it's not gonna work
Yeah.
my pec muscles. It's gonna work my leg muscles. But oftentimes with breathing, or at least like people not understanding the pranayama practices, whatever, they'll give a practice, and if you read into a lot of the texts, they are kind of misleading, because it says like almost every breath practice is like the golden breath practice. It does everything for you. And it doesn't really. Like there's 4 components of the breath. Each component of the breath affects things a little bit different. Then you could add other things into it, like humming to increase nitric oxide. But other than that, the breath is pretty basic. But adjusting the length of the inhale or the exhale, or the amount of the holds, or where you do the holds, either the top, the bottom, or the middle, is going to affect how the body responds to it, how it absorbs oxygen, how it doesn't absorb oxygen, how it affects the nervous system, how it gives you energy or takes away. And that's a really important factor. But also knowing those things, we could look at these pranayama practices and see exactly um, what they do based on the science behind it. Not like again, the yogis invented all these things and they're really amazing, but they didn't exactly have all the science to back it up, to explain
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
They used a different kind of science, which was the experiential science. Like, how does this make me feel? But now we could take those kinds of things of how it makes me feel and what it's actually doing to truly understand it. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those listening to the audience, we are going to take questions very soon. So please leave your questions there. Before we move to them, I do have another question, switching topics here slightly. Dylan, one of the things I like when I see your posts on Instagram is your captions around them. The way your thought-provoking captions, they make me pause. They make me want to read them and actually revisit how I think about a certain thing. I know you just posted something on masculine wearing pink, and then your whole theory behind it, which was so interesting. My question here for you is, you've been a wrestler, you rock climb, you skydive, you've been a firefighter. So for you, it's been movement, and you found your passion in yoga. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like it. Uh, what about somebody else who's trying to figure out, what's my passion? What advice do you have for them? How do I figure out? I know I've been told I should find my passion, but how do I find my passion? It sounds like it came to you.
It took a long time for movement. Is always something that I love. Being human is interesting. Like, just the fact that we have that option. Because if you think back a few hundred, like just a few hundred years, or maybe a little bit farther, maybe like 1,000 years or so, 2,000 years. But the farther you go back, I think the more apparent it is. We really didn't have the option of going like, what's my passion? What's my meaning in life? What's my purpose? Right? Our purpose was to eat, live, and reproduce, and so that future generations could do the same. But now we have all this time and comfort and everything, and so with all this time, it's like, okay, now what do I do with this time? Like, how do I fill this short amount of time in my life and then feel fulfilled? Like the big question is, what's the meaning of life? And Sadhguru, I think he said it best, like living is meaning in of itself. Like we forget that just to live is purpose. That was our original purpose, was to live. Beyond that, it's whatever you choose. I think that we have things that we need. Tony Robbins kind of lays it out as like the basic needs, or the fundamental needs for thriving: certainty, uncertainty, purpose, goals, growth. And then there's two more on top of that, which I think it is the most important. So if we think about, certainty is like I need to have a home. I need to be able to know that I have my next meal coming, and that I'm gonna have shelter and money in the bank and all those things. I need to have that as like the basic necessity. Uncertainty, if every day was exactly the same, then you'd go crazy. And so we need some sort of variety in our life. We need to have some sort of purpose, which is kind of what you're asking right now. And then we need to have growth. So we need to know that we're getting better. So these are like the four, the ones, I would say, like the lower ones. But to really get to purpose, we move like when your real purpose is, you move to like the two higher ones, which is loving connection and contribution. You could have purpose without including loving connection or contribution. Your purpose could be to make a lot of money and to have lots of things and to travel, whatever, and they're really just centered around you. But when you really want to find purpose in life that is truly fulfilling, you need to have these two other ones: loving connection and contribution. How do you give back to the world? Our lives here are so short. I mean, everything is going to eventually end, and then you're going to have the heat death of the universe, and there's going to be nothing, and time doesn't exist. But until then, until there's a solar flare, which could happen actually any day, there could be a massive solar flare that just completely destroys the planet, and we all die tomorrow. I mean,
wait, I need to attend the yoga teacher training by you, Dylan, before that happens.
or an asteroid. Like in 2015, the Earth was almost struck by an asteroid. It was like a pretty near miss. And I was actually thinking it came as close to the Earth as the moon is to the Earth, which is pretty close. What's interesting is that what if it hit the moon? Didn't even hit the Earth, it hit the moon. We would also still die. It would just be a slower death. So anyways, these are where my thoughts go. When you really want to find what is going to have meaning to you, like real meaning, real purpose. So my purpose, my passion, whatever, is not movement. My passion is, how do I share movement with other people? And that's what makes it worthwhile. Like I love doing my handstand practice every day. I love going rock climbing. I love doing all these things. It's fun, but it actually doesn't fulfill me the way that sharing it fulfills me. So if your passion doesn't contribute to other people, you're missing a big part of it. That doesn't mean you have to be a teacher, but when you could include others, that's what really makes us human. That's what makes us different.
Thank you, Dylan. With that, I'm actually going to turn to questions from the audience. I have a question here from Meghna. Meghna's like, any tips for someone with horrible flexibility? I know it improves with time, but a specific yoga video feels stressful to follow.
Okay, flexibility is one of the hard, as far as movement goes, one of the hardest or the most complex subjects, because it has to do with everything from your genetics to your hydration to your connective tissue and the properties of your connective tissue to your nervous system, your muscular system, to the orientation of your joints and the length of, let's say, the neck of your femur or whatever. So all these things are going to factor into it. There's been a lot of studies on flexibility. I think the first part of the question was right on. I know it takes time, and patience is probably the most important skill to learn when trying to become flexible. The other thing is, don't overdo it. The latest science shows, and this is going over metadata analysis with lots of different people, there's also tons and tons of different typologies of stretching. So basically the science shows is we want to stretch each body part, or each, let's say your hamstrings or something, or your hips. You only want to stretch for about 1 to 2 minutes a day for 6 days a week. That doesn't mean like one part. You could stretch for an hour, but I don't want to spend 5 minutes on my hamstrings every day. I only want to spend about 1 or 2 minutes stretching into forward folds or into hips or something like that, and we're going to get the most about it. So really the importance of flexibility is really about consistency, doing it every single day, and this is where you're going to have the greatest response. The other part is we get really the maximum amount of growth from our flexibility at 80% of our range. So you don't need to go to 100% or where people try to push it farther to get the same results that you would at 80%. So this gives you, you're able to increase your flexibility and decrease your chance of injury. So that's my advice with that. Stretch each body part for a minute, 6 days a week, and about 80% of your range of motion.
I know we have time for only one more question, so we'll take that. And as it's coming up, one plug for the fascial stretching that Dylan has on Allo Moves. It's called elasticity and plasticity. So a super interesting training and something we don't think much about, but fascia is something I learned on how important it is when you're thinking about flexibility. So
yeah,
Nina,
that's two.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead, Dylan.
Oh, so that's two of the properties of fascia. The other ones, we have transmission of force and viscoelasticity. Viscoelasticity is a huge part of stretching when you start looking into creep. And then also, yeah, anyways, okay, sorry.
Okay. Nina's question, what are ways you recommend for deepening our yoga practice when we aren't currently looking to be a teacher? Oh yeah, especially when it's all virtual right now.
I would say it's like, I do a lot of self-study. So a lot of times reading books, things that are like really like your yoga practice is so many things. Like if you limit it to just the amount of movement, it's really easy to get burnt out on it, and then you don't really feel like you're growing. But when you expand it to everything else, like your understanding of the truth. And I read a lot of books. That's probably one of the ways that I work the most out of my yoga practice. I watch a lot of videos on YouTube and stuff, just anything that could expand my thought process or get me thinking in a different way. I do meditation every day and breathing every day. The greatest teacher that you'll ever find is going to be yourself. In fact, the only teacher you'll ever know is yourself, because the only way that you learn is through experience. And the only one that could have experiences that you understand is you. So if you're not having those experiences, you're not learning. Another teacher could show you doors or ideas or avenues that create experiences, your own experiences. But really, as a teacher or any teacher, we're just kind of sharing our own personal journey. And the only way that you could learn about that is by having your own personal journey. So we think that we need teachers, but really we need to look within more rather than trying to find someone else to change us.
I love that, Dylan, when you mentioned about experiences are our teacher, and the way we experience them and what we learn from it is really personal. So with that, I want to thank you, Dylan. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your practice. All of you, I encourage you all to go check out Dylan Werner on Instagram or his website. It's all in the YouTube link. And then this book is available on Amazon. And then on the site, if you live internationally, there's other sites you can go buy from.
Actually, one more thing on that. Yesterday, it just went on to Kindle, so you could buy it on Kindle now. The Kindle version's not very pretty. I realize that with books, when you have a book that's like really nicely designed, and my publisher Victory Belt did such an amazing job designing the book. I did all the illustrations in it, which was kind of fun for me, but they made it look beautiful. But then when you put it when it goes into a Kindle version, they like fonts and all that stuff just goes away, and it's just like, yeah. But anyways, it's if you're in a place that you have trouble getting it, I really like the physical copy of the book. It's just a really nice handbook to have. But yeah, it's on Kindle now. So, and it's much cheaper on Kindle. It's like a third of the price. So
Wait, you tell me now. Just kidding.
Well, you got the book now. It'll go nicely on your shelf.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you for joining us today. It was early morning for you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me.